She was already crying when I came through the arrivals gate. I almost missed it. The blur of strangers, the rolling suitcases, the fluorescent hum of the terminal crawling into late afternoon. But then, I shifted the carry-on strap on my shoulder, looked past the first row of waiting faces, and saw her. And my chest went cold in the specific, precise way that happens when your body understands something 3 seconds before your mind does. Because it wasn't Mara. It was her sister, Dana. Dana, who hadn't spoken to me in 6 months outside of polite group texts. Dana, who had stood up at our engagement dinner 10 months ago and given a toast so hollow and careful it felt like something a lawyer had drafted and then toned down for the occasion. Dana, who, in every photo from that night, was looking slightly away from the camera, as if she'd already made a private decision about whether she wanted to be documented as part of whatever Mara and I were building. Dana, who I had written off as someone who simply didn't like me and had made her peace with that and expected me to do the same. She was standing at the edge of the waiting area, holding a paper coffee cup with both hands, and her eyes were red, and her mascara had done what mascara does, and she was wearing Mara's gray sweater, the oversized one with the frayed left cuff, the one Mara always tugged at when she was nervous or thinking or trying not to say something she was about to say anyway, and the sight of that sweater on the wrong body made something drop inside me that I am not sure has fully landed yet. I stopped walking. People moved around me. A child with a balloon bumped into my suitcase and kept going. I said Dana's name like it was a question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. She looked at me. No smile, no nod. She said, "Let's get to the car first." She turned and walked, and I followed her out through the glass doors into the gray afternoon light. And I thought, the entire way across the car park, about all the things that could have put Dana in that terminal instead of Mara. I ran through them the way you run through options when you know the list is finite and you're terrified of what's at the bottom of it. I want to explain what a month away does to a person. Not the version of it that sounds romantic. The longing, the absence, the distance making things clear. But the actual daily texture of it. I had been in Oslo for 28 days coordinating a structural review for a firm I'd spent 3 years building toward. The project was the kind of thing I had been telling Mara about for almost a year before it materialized. One of those goals that lives in your peripheral vision so long that when it finally arrives it feels both enormous and strangely anticlimactic, because the anticipation was the thing you were actually living in. The work itself was exactly what I'd trained for, and exactly as exhausting as I'd expected, and the city was beautiful in the way northern cities are beautiful in autumn. Which is to say, it was gray and cold and strangely still, and the light never quite committed to being either day or night. There was a quality to the Oslo afternoons that felt like something held in suspension, not dark, not bright, just waiting. Every morning I woke in between light and called Mara at what should have been her lunch hour, and we talked about everything and nothing simultaneously. The apartment. A show she'd started without me and felt guilty about, which I found genuinely endearing because she was the kind of person who carried small guilts carefully. Whether we should do a small wedding or a medium one, which turned into a conversation about whether medium was even a real category or just the word people used when they couldn't commit either way. She laughed at that. She had a laugh that started slow and then caught, like a fire that wasn't sure it had been given permission to exist yet. A sound you felt like you had to earn, and when you got it, you remembered why you'd tried. I missed that laugh every single day I was in that gray northern city, and the missing was clean and simple and easy to understand, which is why I did not examine it too closely. I did not call her on the morning I flew back because I wanted to surprise her at the gate. I had bought her a small silver bracelet from a shop near the harbor. A narrow thing with a single knot hammered into the band. Nothing significant. Just something I'd seen in a window on the third day and thought, yes, that's hers. The way you sometimes recognize an object as belonging to someone who isn't there. The shop owner had wrapped it in tissue paper and tied it with a thin string, and I had felt, carrying it back to the hotel, like someone who was doing the right thing, which is one of the better feelings and also, I now know, one of the easiest to perform without noticing. It was in the front pocket of my carry on the entire flight home, and somewhere over the North Sea, watching the clouds below and the dark above, I fell asleep imagining her face when she walked around the corner and saw me at arrivals. I had the whole scene constructed in the detailed way you construct things during long flights, when your mind is soft and willing. She'd be wearing her blue coat. She'd say something dry and funny before she said anything real. Then she'd put her face against my shoulder for a moment without speaking, which was the thing she did when she'd missed me enough that words felt insufficient and she trusted silence more than sentences. Instead, I got Dana's face, Dana's red eyes, Dana's paper cup. "She's not at the apartment," Dana said, once we were in the car and on the motorway and the airport had receded in the mirror behind us. She said it the way you say a thing you've practiced, flat, controlled. Each word placed down with deliberate care, like she was afraid that saying it too fast or too slow would change its meaning in a way she couldn't manage. "She's been at Mum's since Thursday. I had spoken to Mara on Wednesday night. It had been a short call, shorter than usual, and she'd told me she was tired and that she had a headache and that she'd probably just go to bed early. She had said she loved me in the way she sometimes did near the end of long calls, the way where she let the word stay in the air a moment longer than was strictly necessary, as if she was testing its weight, checking whether it still fit the shape of what she meant. I had thought nothing of it except that she was tired, and that I'd be home in 48 hours, and that everything would be easier when I was actually there. "Why?" I said, and it came out flat and low, not as a question, because I think some part of me had already understood the shape of what was coming and was bracing for the contents. Dana kept both hands on the wheel. She didn't look at me. She was quiet for long enough that I counted the rhythm of the lane change lights of the cars ahead of us and lost count and started again. "She found something," Dana said. The word found sat in the air between us. Found, past tense. Completed, already done. "What did she find?" I said. "I think you need to talk to her directly. I'm not here to do the explaining for you." She paused. When she spoke again, it was precise and deliberate. "I'm not doing any of this for you. I'm doing it for her. She needed someone to pick you up from the airport, and I was the one who answered the phone, and that's the beginning and the end of what I owe you." She said the last part like she wanted me to understand the accounting of it, what she'd given, who it was for, what it meant about me that she was the one doing it. And I did understand. What I understood was that Mara had called Dana, who had barely glanced at me across the engagement dinner table, Dana who had barely texted me since, because every other option had felt worse, and that was a fact I sat with in silence for the rest of the drive and tried not to look at directly, because looking at it directly was too much. She pulled up outside a pharmacy 2 blocks from Mara's mother's house. Put the car in park. Didn't say anything for a moment. "I'm not taking you to the door," she said. "She knows you're landing today. She's been thinking about it. If she wants to see you, she'll tell you." She finally looked at me. Really looked at me. The way you look at someone when you're making a final assessment of something. She's barely slept since Thursday. She's been crying more than she's not been crying. She's not okay. I want you to understand that before you say or do anything. I got out of the car. I stood on the pavement with my suitcase and my carry-on and that bracelet in the front pocket and watched Dana pull away without looking back. I took my phone out and texted Mara, "I'm here. I'm 2 blocks from your mum's. I don't know what's happened, but I'm here. Tell me what to do." The 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Then they disappeared, then appeared again and held for longer this time. Then nothing. I stood on that pavement outside the pharmacy and waited. A minute passed. 5 minutes. A woman came out of the pharmacy with a white paper bag and gave me the brief, assessing look that people give to someone who appears to be in the early stages of falling apart in public. I moved slightly to the left, so I was out of the direct line of the door, and stood with my suitcase and waited. 11 minutes. I know exactly because I was watching the clock on my phone the way you watch a clock when you're afraid of what the next second will bring, and counting feels like the only form of control available. 11 minutes is a long time to stand on a pavement outside a pharmacy in the early evening with all your luggage and a bracelet for a woman who may or may not be about to end your life as you've understood it. Then my phone rang. Not a text. A call. Mara's name on the screen, and underneath it the photo I'd set 2 years ago, her laughing on a ferry in the summer, face tilted back, eyes half closed against the wind and the light, not aware I was photographing her, not performing anything, just privately, and completely happy in a way that had made me feel, when I caught it, like I'd seen something I was supposed to earn the right to witness. Like happiness was something she did when no one was watching, and I had gotten lucky enough to be there. I answered. She said, "There's a bench on the left side of the pharmacy. Find it and sit down." I found it. I sat down. The cold of the metal came through my coat immediately. She didn't come out of the house. She stayed on the phone, and her voice was controlled in the way that costs something, the kind of control that you can hear the effort behind. And she told me, 3 weeks before I flew to Oslo, a woman named Claire had sent Mara a message on Instagram. Not an anonymous account, not a blank profile created for the occasion, a real account with a real name and a real face and years of photographs, and a mutual connection between her and Mara that I had not, in all my calculations, thought to account for. The message was short. 6 sentences. Mara didn't read me all of them. She read me 2, and her voice when she read them was the voice of someone reading from something they've memorized because they've read it more times than was good for them. The first sentence said that Claire and I had been in contact for 8 months. The second said that the contact had not, at all points, stayed professional. I need to be as precise here as I know how to be, because precision is the only currency I have left that is worth anything. 8 months ago, I attended a conference in Edinburgh. Claire was there. We had drinks at the hotel bar the first evening with a group of 6 or 7 people from different firms, the usual conference configuration of strangers becoming temporary colleagues, becoming temporary friends. The group thinned across the evening the way groups do. One person went to call their partner. One went to bed. One found someone more interesting elsewhere, until it was the 2 of us, and it was late, and there had been a certain amount of wine and a certain kind of conversation that I had told myself, even while I was having it, was just the conversation of 2 people who were good at talking. And then it was later than that. And what happened next was not what Mara deserved. It was one night. I ended all contact the following morning. Or what I'd told myself was all contact. There was a professional follow-up 2 months later on a project we'd both been tangentially connected to at the conference, which I had decided was nothing, which I had managed carefully and told myself did not count as contact the way the first night had been contact, which I had decided Mara never needed to know about because knowing would only damage something that was otherwise whole and still good. Every sentence I just wrote contains a decision I made. And I made each one wrong. I need to know one thing, Mara said. Her voice had not changed, still controlled, still precise. I need to know if she's lying. The bench was cold through my coat. Down the street, a car alarm started and then thought better of it. A woman walked past with a small dog that stopped to look at me and then was pulled along. She's not lying, I said. Mara was quiet. Not the silence of someone surprised. I think she had been in that silence for 4 days already, building toward this moment, hoping the answer would be different and knowing somewhere that it wouldn't. It was the silence of receiving a confirmation you'd prepared for and still weren't prepared for. Okay, she said. Eventually, Mara, I'm not ready. Her voice broke very slightly on the second word and then recovered. I'm not ready to hear anything else yet. I needed to know if she was lying, and now I know. So, a pause. I'll call you. When I'm ready. If I'm ready. She hung up. I sat on that bench for a long time. I sat there while the light faded, and the pharmacy's sign came on in orange, and the foot traffic on the street thinned, and the cold moved from uncomfortable to something more committed. My phone died at some point, and I found the portable charger in my bag and sat there, waiting for it to come back to life. And when it did, there were no new messages, and I sat some more. Eventually, I walked to a hotel 2 streets over and booked a room for an unspecified number of nights with the particular blank efficiency of someone who needs a task to perform so they don't have to think. I lay on the bed with the lights on and the carry-on the floor beside, me and the silver bracelet still in the front pocket where it had been, since Oslo and I ran through every conversation I'd had with Mara in the 8 months since Edinburgh, looking for the cracks I should have seen. And finding them. Finding all of them. Finding the places where I'd been careful and managed and controlled instead of honest. The places where I'd told myself the careful version was the kind version. The places where kind and honest had quietly stopped being the same thing, and I had chosen kind every time because I was afraid of what honest would cost me. I ordered room service at some point. I ate very little of it. At 9:47 that night, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. I picked up because I had nothing left to protect. It was Claire. Her voice was smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd expanded my memory of her in the intervening months, inflated it to justify the size of the mistake. She said she needed to tell me something she hadn't told Mara. She said she had sent the message because she'd found out something, and she needed Mara to know the truth, and she needed me to know that she knew it. What did you find out? I said. She took a breath. You told me in Edinburgh that the engagement was off, that you and Mara weren't together anymore. Not really. Not in the way that counted. That the engagement was a mistake you hadn't figured out how to undo. She paused. That's why I thought you were someone who was free. I thought what happened was something it wasn't. I never said that, I said. You did. I have the text. From the hotel bar that night. Her voice was careful now, precise in the way Mara's had been earlier, and I wondered briefly if careful precision was what women used when they were delivering information to men who'd given them reasons to need to. You texted me while the others were still there. I still have it. I kept it because I kept everything from that trip, and then I never looked at it again until recently, and when I did, I realized I needed to tell her. I thought about not telling anyone. I thought about just disappearing from the whole thing. But you're flying home to her, and she's there waiting, and she doesn't know what kind of person is coming back, and I couldn't. She stopped. Started again. I couldn't let her not know. Read me the text, I said. She read it. It was from my number. The timestamp said 11:40 p.m. I had no memory of sending it, and I had no explanation for how it existed. After she hung up, I sat very still for a long time. The room was the specific beige of hotel rooms that are trying to be neutral and have achieved something closer to invisible. There was an abstract print on the wall across from the bed, blue and ochre shapes that could have been anything, and I looked at it without seeing it for a long time, which is something I do not normally do, and which tells me something about the state I was in. Then I did what I should have done in Edinburgh, or the morning after Edinburgh, or in any of the 8 months that stretched between then and now. I went into my messages. I scrolled back 8 months with the slow, deliberate motion of someone approaching something they're not sure they want to confirm is there. I found the thread, and I looked. The text was there. My name at the top, my number. 11:40 p.m. from a hotel bar in Edinburgh. 4 sentences that I had apparently sent to a woman I'd met that evening. 4 sentences in which I had translated my entire engagement, my entire life with Mara, into something I'd stumbled into before I understood the size of what I was agreeing to, and hadn't yet worked out how to address with any honesty. I sat with that text open on the phone for a long time. I didn't delete it. I didn't think I had the right to. And beyond that, I think I understood that it was the most honest document I'd produced in 8 months, and destroying it would be one more thing I'd have to carry. And then, sitting in that room with the bracelet still in the carry-on on the floor, and the room service barely touched, and the abstract print doing nothing useful on the wall, I tried to do what I should have done a year ago. Not to explain or defend, just to actually look. I pushed past the wine and the late hour and the particular false courage of hotel bars, and I tried to find what had been true underneath all of it. Not the Edinburgh version, not the story I'd told myself in the months after, but the actual feeling that had existed before I translated it into a lie at 11:40 p.m. to a woman whose name I had not known that morning. And I found it. It was fear, not fear of Mara, not fear of the relationship, not fear of any particular thing I could have named and addressed if someone had asked me directly. Just the low chronic fear of having said yes to the enormity of a life with someone specific, in the permanent binding way that a ring and a date on a calendar and a venue deposit makes permanent, of being someone's entire person, and them being yours, and discovering one day that the version of yourself you'd presented to that person was the edited version, the managed version, the version that smiled at dinner parties and made plans, and kept the unmanaged interior of itself very quiet and very controlled. And not being sure whether the managed version was who you actually were, or whether it was a performance you'd been running so long you'd stopped being able to find the line between the two. I had gone to Edinburgh, carrying that fear, and not said a word about it to Mara, because I didn't know how. Because I'd been performing certainty for long enough that admitting uncertainty felt like pulling a thread that might unravel something I wasn't prepared to watch come apart. Because I loved her, genuinely. The love was not the lie. But I had let the love become a reason to keep the fear secret, rather than a reason to tell her about it. And somewhere between those two choices I had made myself into a person who lied in hotel bars and then forgot about it. I had spent 8 months telling myself the problem was one night in Edinburgh and a decision to keep it hidden. The real problem was older than Edinburgh, quieter than any single night, and more completely mine than I had been willing to face. I texted Mara at 11:15, not an explanation, not a defense, just, "Can I send you something? You should see it before I say anything else." She replied 2 minutes later, "Send it." I forwarded the text. My number, Edinburgh, 11:40 p.m., all 4 sentences. I added nothing to it. I let it arrive without a frame, She took 3 hours to respond. The hotel was very quiet. I didn't sleep. I watched the gap between the curtains turn from black to blue to something closer to gray, and thought about how much of the past year I had managed instead of lived, and how much of managing I had, called love. Her message came at 4 in the morning, her time. One line. "So you lied to both of us." Not an accusation, a statement. Like she was entering something into a record. I typed 6 different responses and deleted each of them. What I finally sent was this. Yes, I didn't know the full shape of it until tonight. But yes, I was lying to both of you, and I was lying to myself, and I'm sorry isn't a sufficient word for any of this, but it's what I have right now. She didn't reply that night. She didn't reply the next day. I stayed in the hotel. I ate badly and slept in fragments, and sat by the window watching the street below, and tried to think about what honesty would have looked like if I'd been willing to attempt it at any earlier point in Edinburgh, or the morning after, or the month before when Mara and I had been on the phone talking about wedding sizes, and I'd been laughing at the medium category while quietly terrified of all of them. Donna texted me on the second day. Not on Mara's behalf, her own message, in her own voice, which was more direct than I'd ever heard her be with me. She's not okay, but she's talking again. That's more than Thursday. I replied, "Thank you for picking me up from the airport." She wrote back, "I didn't do it for you." "I know," I said. "I know you didn't. Thank you anyway." There was a pause long enough that I thought she was done. Then, "She still has your mother's ring in the dish by the front door. She hasn't moved it. I don't know what that means, and I'm not going to try to tell you what it means. I'm just telling you." I read that message probably 15 times over the next hour. I still didn't know what it meant. I'm not sure I know now. On the third day, Mara called. She didn't start with hello. She said, "I need you to answer one question honestly. Honestly, not managed, not the version that sounds best. I need to know the real thing." "Okay," I said. "Before Edinburgh, before any of it. Were you actually happy, or were you performing it? Because I need to know if what I thought we had was real, or if it was just. If I was watching a performance the whole time and missed it." I took the longest breath I've ever taken in a conversation that mattered. "The love was real," I said. "I need you to know that first, because it's the truest thing and everything else comes after it. The love was not performed. It was never performed, but I was frightened of the size of what I'd agreed to, and I didn't tell you I was frightened because I didn't have the language for it. Because admitting I was frightened meant admitting I wasn't the person I'd been presenting, and I was terrified of what would happen to us if I wasn't that person. So instead I went to Edinburgh, performing a confidence I didn't have, and at some point that night I swapped the performance for a lie, and then spent 8 months convincing myself the lie was just a bad night, rather than a symptom of something I'd been refusing to look at for a long time." She was quiet. "I loved you," I said. "I love you." That's not what was performed. I performed the certainty. I performed the version of myself who had it all ordered and understood. The love under all of that was the one part I wasn't making up. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me," she said. And the way she said it was not soft. It was not forgiveness. It was something more complicated than either of those things. The sound of someone who has been waiting for a version of you that you kept hidden and is not sure yet what to do with it now that it's finally here. "I know," I said. "I know it's too late for that to be the first honest thing." "Maybe," she said. "I don't know yet." We talked for 2 hours, not about what comes next. She wasn't ready to approach next, and I understood that, and didn't try to rush her there. Because the one useful thing I could offer at that point was the patience I should have been offering all along. We talked instead about the texture of the year we'd both lived inside. The specific, granular texture of it. The version that doesn't make it into the calls you have when someone is in another country and you're performing normalcy at each other across the time zone gap. She told me she'd been carrying something she couldn't name for months. A low-grade sense of something being slightly off-register, like a picture that's hung almost straight, but not quite. And you keep looking at it thinking it's fine, and then looking again and knowing it isn't. She'd noticed there were moments when I was present, and moments when I was performing presence, she said, and she'd told herself it was the stress of building the business, the weight of the engagement planning, the ordinary accumulation of responsibilities that makes people go inward without meaning to. She'd chosen the kind interpretation every single time. She said it plainly, without self-pity, and without accusation. She'd given me the benefit of the kind interpretation over and over, because she loved me, and because she decided that loving someone meant giving them that benefit until they gave you a reason not to. And she was now sitting with the question of whether that generosity had been trust, or whether it had been something she'd been performing for herself. The role of someone who wasn't afraid to look closely at the person she'd chosen to love. I think I knew something, she said. I think I knew something was being managed, and I kept deciding I was imagining it. Because the alternative was too heavy. I know, I said. I'm sorry you had to carry that. Don't apologize for that part yet, she said. We're not there yet. And we weren't. We kept talking. She told me she'd called Dana, because Dana had always been the one in her family who would say the true thing even when the true thing made the room go quiet. The one who would tell her whether she was catastrophizing, or whether she had every right to feel what she was feeling, without padding it or prettying it up. And Dana had said, Mara told me this near the end of our second hour, her voice different by then, something having shifted in it, some of the careful control giving way to something tireder and more real. Dana had said, You're not overreacting. He lied, and that is what it is. And you're allowed to feel all of what you're feeling. But before you make any decision that can't be undone, you should talk to him. Because I've watched the two of you together. And there is something real there. And I have been too jealous of what you have to say that out loud until now. But it's true. And you deserve to know it's true before you decide anything. That was Dana, who had stood at our engagement dinner and given the toast like a careful stranger, who had looked slightly away in every photograph that year, who had driven to the airport in her sister's gray sweater with red eyes and picked me up and handed me the worst moment of my life, and then drove away without watching it happen, because everything she'd done was for her sister, not for me, and she kept that distinction clean and intact with a precision I found, sitting in that hotel room, turning it over. Genuinely extraordinary. She loves you, I said to Mara. I know, Mara said. She's always loved me too much to make any of it easy, and the way she said it was the way you talk about someone who has loved you so completely and so inconveniently that you've had to forgive them for it repeatedly over the years, and you would do so again, and both of you know it. The ring is still in the dish by the front door. Mara went back to the apartment on the 4th day. She called me from there, not to tell me to come home, just to talk. And we have been talking since in the careful, tentative way of two people who are trying to figure out whether what's been broken can be rebuilt into something that is different but still worth building, or whether what's been broken is the foundation and there is nothing to build on. I do not know the answer. She doesn't either. What we have agreed is that we are not making any permanent decisions in the month that follows the worst week of both our lives, and that we will keep talking, and that if we talk long enough, maybe we will find out what we actually are to each other when neither of us is performing anything. The bracelet is still in the carry-on. I take the bag out sometimes and look at the front pocket and don't open it. The shop near the Oslo harbor where I bought it had a small engraving on the sign in Norwegian that I photographed to translate later. It said something like, "A knot holds the thing you need it to hold." I thought it was a nice image when I took the photo. I still think it's a nice image. I just don't know yet if it applies to anything I'm trying to hold. What I know is this. You can love someone fully and still be lying to them. Not the deliberate kind of lying, not the kind that requires planning and cover, but the soft daily kind, where you perform the version of yourself that fits the story you've both agreed to tell. And you do it so habitually and so completely that you forget it's a performance. Until one night in a hotel bar at 11:40 p.m., you send a text that is more honest than anything you've said in months, and you don't even remember sending it, because the honest thing came from a part of you that you've been keeping so quiet you'd almost convinced yourself it wasn't. There. That's not an excuse. I want to be clear about that. It doesn't excuse Edinburgh, and it doesn't excuse the 8 months after it. It's just what I found when I finally looked. A man who loved someone enough to build a life toward her, and was too frightened to tell her the truth about the fear that came along with the love. And now she's in the apartment with the ring in the dish by the door, and I'm in a hotel 2 streets away, and we're both trying to figure out if there's anything left of what we were that's worth finding our way back to. Have you ever loved someone so much that the size of it frightened you? Not away from them, but into a silence you didn't know was a lie until it was too late to take it back. And have you ever been the one waiting for a person who was supposed to come home, who you trusted was coming back to you, and known, the moment you saw who was there instead of them, that something had already changed in a way that couldn't be managed or explained away or covered by the kindest interpretation you had left?